Is the sound working? I hope it is, everybody in chat. Hello, everybody. This is Dennis, the world's most Okayest DM here once again, but not with Botched Love. I asked Mike if he wanted to, and he does not want to play Dream Daddies at this particular time. But you might notice that I'm joined with somebody that you've never seen before. This is my good friend, Mike Holtz. Say hi to everybody, Mike.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, good. I was like, is he just going to wave? He's not going to say words? Okay. Well, I guess we have videos. That's something at least. But, so we are doing a thing because of our Patreon account. Now, if you've not been to our Patreon, head on over to patreon.com/botchedpodcast and subscribe at any of the levels from $1 to $50. But because we hit a certain level, every month we're going to do a 1 hour or more Q&A session with me, Dennis World's Okayest DM, and then other DMs that I find as well. So feel free to put any of your questions in the chat, and we'll be answering them. If you don't have any questions, then basically Mike and I will just start asking each other questions, and then we're going to do it that way. So whatever it takes to fill the time. So hopefully, can everybody in the chat hear me, by the way? Because I haven't seen anybody say anything in the chat yet, so I'm slightly paranoid that we're just talking and nothing's actually happening. Fuck it. We'll do it live. All right. So, Mike, my first question for you is just sort of how long have you been playing D&D?
I've been playing D&D since high school. So, what is that? 15 years-ish?
Don't remind me how long it's been. You could just say high school and just leave it at that, Mike. You don't have to make me sad. Fuck off, Phil. Phil says in the chat to get a new shirt, Dennis. Hi, Steve. Hey, he who is Steve says, hi, good morning, and happy birthday. He can hear us, so great. Overton. Hey, Nolan. Hope everything's good. Haven't heard from you in a while, buddy. So I also started playing D&D in high school with Mike in his basement.
Mm-hmm.
You had like a boom box going with Lord of the Rings music and little battle maps and things.
Yeah.
That was 4E, which is how I got introduced to D&D, which was D&D 4E. Everybody hates that version.
Hated it. Very hard to DM 4E.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mind it because that's the first one I learned, so. But it had, like, I think the problem with that was they tried to make it too much like a board game or a video game with all your different abilities and powers. I mean, even fighters had powers and abilities every single level that you had to pick from, so it wasn't just normal, like, I attack.
Yeah, I think it was really trying hard to compete with World of Warcraft at the time.
Yeah, that did come out right around that same time, didn't it? So, have you been DMing... So how often do you get to DM? Like, are you DMing, every year? Are you DMing, every few years? Like, do you still play frequently or not really?
Not as often as I used to, unfortunately.
Okay.
But
thanks, Phil, for the Twitch Prime sub, by the way. It's much appreciated. Thaco, discuss. Thaco is what, Mike? Is that D&D 2nd edition, Thaco? Do you know what I'm talking about? Did you ever play the 2nd edition?
No, I started 3, did a little bit of 3.5, and then 4 and 5.
Okay.
So I'm not purist in that sense.
Okay. So when I started playing with some of the crew that I currently play with, we started in 2nd edition, which was their preferred one. And he who is Steve says AD&D. So yes, 2nd. That's how they did AC. And it was the most convoluted fucking thing. You had to figure out all these different if-then statements as to whether or not something hit you instead of just having a static number. And to this day, I have no idea how that works. I will show you sometime, and you'll just be like, "What the fuck is this thing?" I don't even. But so yes, so Nolan.
Yeah, I mean, math slows down the game a lot, so I tend to steer clear of as much math as I can.
Yeah, and Nolan just put in the chat when TSR made up math and alignment actually mattered, because these days it doesn't really seem like alignment matters too much. I mean, that depends on who you play with, which we'll get into that a little bit later. But I'm gonna assume that your alignment does matter in some particular games, not ours, because they're all murder hobos. So if we actually did alignments, they would have to either pick one that fits or never be allowed to do anything that they actually want to do. Hey, Paul, welcome to the chat.
Even 5e, I've noticed that there are a lot fewer spells that actually depend on your alignment as well. They've really taken that, put it in the back seat.
Yeah, they're. It seems like they're kind of trying to streamline things, but also make it so they don't infringe on what players want to do. So, for instance, we just made a rule for the 4th season based off of a suggestion that's in the book, where it says you can't use persuasion, intimidation, or anything like that on other playable characters, because you are essentially making that player do something that they don't actually want to do. So it goes against the intent of the game, they said. You could still do it if that's your thing, because as with most things in D&D, you can do whatever the hell you want. The rules are more guidelines than anything else. But
I think it depends on how well your team can improv. Because if you do like an insight or a counter skill to someone's bluff or deception, then you can really have fun with it.
Yeah. In that sense, yes. In our case, what ends up happening is Phil or Tristan has an idea and they want Austin to do it, but he doesn't want to do it, so they just force him to do it. Yeah. So I made it, and I used this example in the 4th season where I said, if Phil wants Austin to fuck a cat, and that's against Austin's character, he has to physically take Austin and make him do it in order to do it. And then it's not really Austin in that case. It's not up to him. It's up to Phil at that point. He and the cat they're good. But, so let me look here in the chat, see if we had any other questions. So Soapbox Klotz, alignment causes a ton of conflict between players and DMs. You are not wrong at all. And then Steve chimes in with players and players. Yes, that's very much true. Alignment is now very much a role-playing and not stat construct anymore, which is good. Just like real life, says Phil. Of course he would think that, fucking greasy murder hobo. So the first question that I want to get into... Well, before I get into the ones that you sent me, Mike, I have a question for you. Do you have a preference in terms of team makeup, or like not necessarily team makeup, but like player makeup in terms of, you know, the type of people you like to play with? Not necessarily the classes, but the actual people.
In terms of what?
People who play fast and loose with the rules, people who play like rules Nazis, those who don't talk very much, those who talk all the time, those who take the lead constantly, like, you know, what anything in that vein, I guess I would say.
It's hard to play with type A people sometimes.
Okay.
Especially if they're a rules Nazi. It can really slow things down.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Yeah, but I've been pretty lucky with the people I've played with. You know, there are some times where there's just a clash. If someone is really domineering, then people who aren't quite that way can just, you know, kind of sit back and not do anything, and then you can tell they're not having a good time.
Yeah, like if they're knitting at the table or something like that.
Yeah, just on the phone is the biggest thing. Like if someone's on their phone, they're bored, and you have to.
Not according to our table, because they're all on their phones constantly. According to them, they're all very engaged. Phil says he's doing work every time, and then he accidentally makes a noise because he's playing a game or something, and oh, shit. Yeah, sneaky Phil, too. I need to figure out if there's a device that would somehow not affect the computer, but I could basically end all cell signal within like a 30-foot cube, so then they can't use their phones. That would be fantastic if there is such a device. I'm sure there's some DM at MIT that's coming up with that, I hope.
Yeah, I'm sure China's got something.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely China has something. But and just as an aside, anyone who isn't already following the channel, hit the follow button. You'll get to see a fun little GIF. If you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe through Twitch Prime, because Amazon owns Twitch, in which case you will subscribe to our show for free, and then Amazon, aka Jeff Bezos, will have to ride a greasy hog to Gettysburg and pay me a check himself in person. So you should definitely do that, because it is worth the viewing pleasure. And if you want to throw in bits in the chat, those are always appreciated. We don't have any choices to make, so unfortunately there's no bonus for being Bit Boss, aside from my very, very temporary love and adoration, because if it changes to somebody else, I no longer love the person that's in second place. I love only the person in first place. So, he who is Steve says such a device does exist. It's called concrete. Yes. Good luck, Steve, destroying 4 other people's phones and then not getting, ganged up on. I'm sure they would all be very into that idea. They're not violent, especially after drinking for hours on end. Not at all. So to piggyback on what we were saying about the rules Nazi thing, so what is it that you find difficult about playing with rules Nazis? Because I know in my experience that just because they're a rules Nazi doesn't necessarily mean that they're like the take charge kind of player. There's just the nitpick you every time you say or do anything. Actually, it's the riding speed of horses is you can only ride, 7 squares every 3 days if they're fed and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that type of thing. So what's your experience as far as rules Nazis go?
It ranges, but I think overall D&D, the rules are there as a guideline, right? You want to satisfy the intent of the rules, not necessarily the letter of the rules.
Yeah.
If I can describe it that way. So they're there to help, I think, guide maybe inexperienced DMs or people who aren't quite familiar with the flow of how things should go.
Sure.
But it's really up to the DM, in my opinion, to use the narrative to kind of move things along. And if you're keeping track of gallons of water people drink a day and making sure they make their players go to the bathroom, that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't see the fun in that piece, but maybe if you got a table that the people want to do it, go for it.
Yeah. And I think that goes to one of the more difficult things with D&D is you have to find a set of people that you can stand being around a table for 4 hours and you can actually have fun playing with. As you found recently, if you want to talk about it at all, you tried to go to like a local D&D thing. Didn't really work out too well in your favor. You just want to talk about that briefly? Like what went awry?
Yeah, it's hard to play D&D with a bunch of strangers.
Okay.
Even the Adventure League kind of, it's just kind of a pickup, but I don't think people understand each other quite. It's got to go through kind of a few sessions to get to know each other, humanities, and I was just at a table where none of the people clicked, so it was really hard to get more than one person to talk and.
Did anybody at the table know each other, or was everybody? Everybody was strangers. Oh, that's definitely difficult then, because you need to know at least one person at the table, or it makes it really hard for anybody to open up. Nobody wants to talk. Nobody wants to take initiative. I mean, we even have that, and we all know each other. Like when Phil's gone, nobody wants to make decisions. But what's funny is when Phil's there, everybody has no problem making decisions. Like, for whatever reason, he just needs to be present for them to feel okay with making decisions. I don't get it. Because Austin's usually the one that pipes in first and says, I want to do this or that. And then Phil either goes along with it or sabotages it. But if Phil's not there, Austin won't make the decision for some reason. I don't get it. So it's weird how that the team.
Yeah, it's team dynamics. I mean, that's. I don't know if anyone listening does any kind of group work or team projects or anything, but I mean, it's very applicable to DMing, right? You have to know each other's tendencies and strengths and weaknesses and strengths and really kind of play to that in a sense.
Yeah.
Without a missing link, everything is different.
Phil says because he's the boss. Yeah. We'll see when I take your legs again. We'll see who's boss. By the way, everyone keeps asking for me to take your legs, so you're lucky that I've let it be for this long without taking appendages, just saying. But, yeah, I've played, there was this guy that lives in town, his name's Matt, and he's a rules Nazi with every game. It's not even just D&D. At least with board games, most of the times you do have to follow the rules because they're pretty strict. But anything that's even slightly open to interpretation, no. It's letter of the law in the book, even though the book's vague about it, but how he interprets it, that is what the rule is, because that's what the book says. And you just get bogged down in all that minutia and whatnot. And for those of you in the chat that don't know, when we first started the show, we actually had to record the first couple episodes of the show like 3 times. The first time we recorded it was with a shitty microphone, and we were just checking to see if it'd be funny. And then, or maybe it wasn't the first. No, the first time we recorded, it was Tristan DMing, because it was his campaign in the first season. And it got really bogged down because he had to keep checking the book every 2 seconds. Just check the book, check the book, check the book. And we said, it's fine, because Dennis is just going to edit the blank spots out. But it still slowed everything down that when you did start to play again, nobody was paying attention. Like, everybody was out of it, nobody was engaged, and it's hard to get that momentum back. Even if you are going to cut it out in post, it doesn't help in-game in the moment. So then what we did was we re-recorded it, but I DM'd, and I'm much more fast and loose with the rules because I don't care as long as it makes sense. If you want to argue a rule, as long as it makes sense logically to me, I'll go with it. Now, that can backfire because, as Mike knows, the first time I ever DM'd was with Mike and his little brother and maybe somebody else, I can't remember. And they knew I didn't know the rules, so they just got away with bloody murder. Oh, I'm a level 1 ranger, and it says I get a pet, so dire winter wolf. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then I'm looking up the stats for a winter dire wolf, and yeah, the dire wolf just solos everything. And I'm like, okay, no, they're obviously fucking with me. And then every time they would do anything, oh, well, I can just do this because that's what I have. And then later find out that no, that's not an ability that class has. It's an ability that a different class has 10 levels later. I think I ended that campaign with just God smiting you, just a fist, because I didn't want to play with you people anymore.
Yeah. It was a fist or a finger or something.
Something like that, because I hate all of you so much. But Nolan Overton says, you're the boss. That's Britchin dude and stuff. I live in Western North Dakota. I'm happy English is still mostly used. Nolan, we've never been to North Dakota, and I don't think any other humans have either. So we're going to have to take you at your word there, because I don't know if you're actually talking to people. You might just be talking to coyotes. Just saying. But we've had that with the current table with the rules Nazi stuff. Mostly it's just John. Anybody who's played anything with John knows that he's a rules Nazi, especially with D&D. He made for season 3, he made this map that is a grid to show you how far everything is, because they felt in season 2 we traveled too far too fast. We were basically Game of Thronesing in season 2. And so the way he did it was all right, so I made this map, and this is how many spaces and how many miles a thing is, a unit of time. So based on his map, the time it would take you to travel from the starting point of the story to the next part of the story were months by foot. And by horse, it was still weeks. And I think the next part of the story, it would take, because you were supposed to be investigating a murder, which they never technically solved anyways. I think by horse, it was supposed to take 2 months or something like that. And I was like, well, in 2 months, if that's an actual murder scene, like, everything's gone. Like, there's going to be nothing there. So this just seems like it impedes on the story to do it that way. So then I just started saying, nah, these horses are real fast. They're like 4 times faster than normal horses, and they don't ever need to rest. And he's like, well, but nope, don't care. We're doing it this way. Or then eventually I was just like, you have an airship all the time. It goes way faster. Fuck this map. Just do it that way. And that's how I'm going to be for pretty much everything going forward. I just don't care about travel time. Nobody wants to listen to, like, 6 hours of travel episodes where, okay, what random encounter happens to you on the road this time, and then this time, and then this time, and then this time. Like, you need to have something to spice things up.
And it depends. Like, if you have a table that they want to role play,
sure,
those kind of intervals, intermissions are really good opportunities to do that.
Sure.
So yeah, if you're just doing like a hack and slash or a next let's skip kind of group, then yeah, travel time isn't.
Sure. So do you have a preference in terms of when you're playing D&D to have a hack and slash type story a story that's very light on combat, but maybe more on skill checks and puzzles and things like that? Or do you like an even mix? Because I know some people really like one over the other.
I like an even mix,
Okay.
because classes are so different
Mm-hmm.
that like if you have someone playing a bard and it's all combat, they're going to be bored.
What are you
But if
talking
you
about?
throw
Bards
them
are
into
really
like
good. They just
yeah,
sing songs the whole time.
if they're played well, they can
Sure.
be.
Hey, I just made you better again. I'm not doing anything, but I'm making you better. I'm letting you be all you can be. That's fun.
Yeah.
I'm the support. Um, and I find that it's more interesting to listen to the ones that are, in terms of podcasts, the ones that are like an even mix of things. Because when you just have like I've listened to the ones that are hack and slash only. We've had episodes that are hack and slash only. They are painful to listen to because it's just there's nothing going on. There's not as much interaction. Now, unless you have a DM that's really clever with the combat, and like it's not just like a straightforward hack and slash. And I can speak to the fact that I've tried to make combat not that way, and the dumb fucks that I play with just don't do that. Like I tried to make it in season 2. Any of you guys that remember or even listen to the show, there was a Terminator Doglin that was on tank treads, and when you run up to it and hit it after so many rounds, it just starts spewing sleeping gas. So a normal human with a functioning brain would think, I shouldn't stand in the sleeping gas. I should move out of the gas. No, that would be dictating their playstyle. So they all passed out in the sleeping gas and then got mad because they fell asleep. Because they just wanted to stand in one spot and hit it with a sword. And they fought a giant robot made of other tiny robots in the first season. And I put it in a city, so there's all these different, I was like, oh, there's all these different levels of buildings, like they could do all that. Nope, they just ran up to the foot and just started tinking it on the foot with swords until Tristan came up with some weird cockamamie idea of like shooting himself off of a ballista or something. I forget, it was something weird. But
I think I remember that.
yeah, and I don't even think they directly killed the robot. I think he's ballisted himself into like a dragon that was controlling the robot or something. I don't remember, but at least that was different than just standing there and tink, 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 tink this robot. So it also depends on who you're playing with, because if nobody wants to think of anything creative, it's really hard to make creative encounters. Because while you might think, okay, if I put this like weak point in here and I do this and I do this and I do this, well, they might not ever figure that out. They might not even look for it. They might just think, well, I'm running in and I'm hitting this, and that's what I'm going to do. So that's
Yeah,
one
it
of
kind
those
of goes
weird
back
things.
to like know your audience.
Yeah, being able to predict the unpredictable is tough. At least when it comes to combat. I've gotten
That goes to
really,
one of the
really
questions
good
I
at
wanted
it
to.
with other things. Sorry, what were you saying?
That's one of the questions I was going to ask you is how much time as a DM do you spend planning ahead?
Which season are we talking? Because if we're
Give me
talking,
the progression.
okay, so before we started recording, and I was DMing, I had everything written out. I mean everything, dialogue, characters, places, everything that was going to happen. Everything was written out. But because I knew I couldn't predict what they were going to do, I had like 10 different possibilities that I thought might happen, and I wrote them all out. And then I ran the story off of each one of those. So I basically drove myself insane doing like a beautiful mind spiderweb thing as to like all these different things that could happen. And then the next season I did the same thing, or not season, but the next campaign did the same thing. When it came time to record, I got less with that and started, it was still written a fair amount, but it was more bare bones because of the fact that the way we did the show, it was supposed to be Tristan DMing. That's who was supposed to do the first season. It was his story. It was his idea, all that jazz. But when we play tested it, it wasn't good. So they said, Dennis, you DM, and you can DM Tristan's story. So he gave me the bulletin points and like the bare bones of the story itself. And then I sort of filled in the meat here and there. And then the second season came up. Same thing. Austin's supposed to DM. He DM'd the prequel episodes to that season, but then after he got done with, I think it was like 4 or 5 episodes, something like that. He said, because we were about to start the second season in like the actual second season, he said, "Yeah, I don't want to do this. I hate DMing." So he again gave me all the bulletin points, and then I filled in the meat. So it ended up having to, and with that one, because it was so open ended, it was really hard to write just one continuous thing because they could go anywhere. There was like, I forget how many gems, like 6 gems, so they could go after any gem. So it really depends on which direction they go. So if you just wrote a static narrative, it would be really hard to be able to figure out where somebody's going to go. And then season 3, same thing. That one was supposed to be everybody does their own little thing and then put it together. Well, we tried that and it failed horribly. So everybody gave me their stories and then I sort of went off of it. But again, you don't know what players are going to do. So it's really hard to predict where they're going to go and what their actions are going to be. I've gotten really, really good at figuring out what fuckery they're going to do. Not combat. I still cannot figure out for the life of me what they're going to do in combat. But screwing up everything, I've almost got that down to a science, which they didn't like because it ended up screwing them in the end because I was like, I knew you were going to be murder hobos, and then you just ran right into the murder hobos thing. So let me check the chat here and see if so hey, who is Steve? They're talking about the airship from season 1 of the Feral Catskins. I also love that particular vehicle. And if you're a Patreon for $20 a month, we actually have a artist's rendering of that particular airship, which was really, really, really good. Hey, who is Steve says, yeah, camp and wagon time is often when some of the best character building moments happen in my experience. Yeah, we don't really have a whole lot of camp building time. Wagon time, we've had that, but camp building time, not so much. Hack and slash people.
You got so many characters in your seasons that it's hard to get attached to them.
Yeah. Well, so if you actually look at the seasons, each season people have died less and less. Now, whether or not that's a product of people getting really angry about their characters dying, that's a different subject. But Zukari says hack and slash people are why fast travel was invented. You are not wrong. Hack and slash versus role-playing all depends on how the week went. Murder hoboing is therapeutic. You're not wrong, Nolan. They must be having a terrible week every week. That might be why. Zukari says, my group needed a break from DMing, so we switched, and now are picking up the rise of Tiamat. All they seemed to want was combat. When I throw them in an arena for fun, they told me it seems generic, and that he wasn't planning enough. To his understanding, ROT, I guess it's Rise of Tiamat, is very heavy with role-playing, but also very hard combat-wise. So I'm interested to see how this turns out. So to piggyback off that, Mike, have you ever done a pre-made campaign, or do you do everything based, do you make it all up yourself?
Yeah, I've done the Adventure League, some of the Adventure League ones.
Okay.
That they put out. They're good for the kind of pickup games where it's a lot of strangers and you don't know each other, and it's meant to only last 4 hours or at a clip. Mm-hmm. But if I'm doing a campaign, it's usually homebrew.
Okay. So I've never tried to run a out of the book campaign and that could just be my lack of understanding, because I'm like, well, how do you where do you put room for being creative or role playing or whatever? Like, does it give you the space to basically just come up with stuff on the fly and just be like, I'm not going to go into the castle. I'm going to just try and scale the whole thing when the entire book is nothing but what's in the castle. Like,
yeah.
Does it give you that much room for improv, I wonder?
No, it's pretty sequential.
Okay.
It's for people who take the obvious bait of, yes, you have to talk to the lone person at the tavern, and yes, you get the quest, and yes, you're going to go do it, and you're going to go in the door, and that kind of stuff. It's pretty cut and dry. Yeah, and one of the ones that I played was there was some circus coming to town or something, and it was spreading disease, and one of the players was like, we're just going to burn it down. And it's like, okay, well, there goes the rest of everything, because it's all based on that wagon. So you burn it down. It's like, well, the book is not prepared for that.
Yeah, so that's why I just the idea of doing a pre-made just never appeals to me. And I've been a player in the pre-made ones, and they don't seem nearly as fun. Like, they seem very dry and formulaic almost. When someone has to make up shit on the fly, I find that's way more interesting, because it's like, okay, now I get to figure out the brain process of this crazy person as they're trying to deal with my fuckery of some type. And vice versa, me trying to come up with, like, whatever. Like, when Phil, in the second season, I had one of those characters. It's like, hey, I'm this old man who has a quest for you. Phil knocked his head in with a mace while he was riding by, so they never got that quest. And then the whole town came after them, and then they weren't welcome back in that town again. And you just roll with it. It wasn't imperative to the story, so it was totally fine. But then later on, when they got the next piece of the quest, they were like, oh, yeah, there's only one more piece. Oh, there's only... that one guy's the only person that knew. Oh, shit. Okay, well, fuck it. Whatever, move along. But, like, if you tried to do... Like, if we tried to make the second season of our campaign into a playable thing, like a Rise of Tiamat or something like that. Whatever, Imaginary Nomad. He was not racist. He barely said anything. He was a normal person, and you smashed him in the head with a hammer because you didn't want to do the quest. You wanted to be away from those walrus people in Tuskington. I don't even remember what I was talking about. Phil does this all the time. He gets me off topic, and then I can't remember what I was even saying. But
if you try to fit that into a pre-made campaign.
Oh, yeah. So because it was a whole continent, and you had 6 gems that you could get in any order you wanted. Didn't matter what order you went in. But then also, there were a bunch of cities and towns that had nothing to do with the story. So, for instance, when they got, I think it was the stone that was in Massive City, they're like, we want to go to the Moose People. What? Yeah, no, we want to go see Moose People. Okay. And then I, on the fly, had to come up with an entire plot line around what's going on in Moose People land, which was actually ended up being a lot of fun because they got there as there was like a peace summit between rabbits and other versions of rabbits, which were just like Pennsylvania people. It was just like a bunch of hill people from Pennsylvania. And then there was like a terrorist attack, and that part got kind of serious and dark, even though they still did some funny things with it. And some characters died, and then they had to uncover all that stuff. And it ended up being like a really fun and interesting side quest, even though it wasn't planned at all. And then there was a time where they said, we want to go to other continents, at which point, out of game, Phil was like, this season is already 50 episodes long. Like, we need to be done. Like, no more going outside of the coloring book. Like, get back on topic. Back on target.
Well, I think you touched on a really important piece. It's almost like that improv rule, right? You want to play yes and let them run with it.
Yeah.
Because if you try to keep them in between the lanes all the time, they're going to get frustrated. You're going to get frustrated, and it's better to let them go. Let's go meet the Moose People and just see what happens.
Yeah. Have you ever played with somebody that, even though it was made up, that it was, I call them like on-rail shooters, where your decisions don't matter because you have to do this one thing, you have to go to this one place, you have to do this. Have you ever played in one of those?
Mm-hmm.
How much fun was that for you?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
I mean, if it's more of a hack and slash, and it's more of I want to just kind of play this character and use the skills and the abilities and stuff. I mean, it's fun playing Halo, right? You know what's going to happen. You follow the track through the levels and get to the next part, and it's still fun to play. So, but if you're really looking for, this is an open sandbox, I want to kind of play my own thing, then it can get frustrating.
Well, with Halo and other video games, what I notice is, and I've been around a little bit of game design to know that the way they do it is they put like a little shiny carrot to let you know that you have to do this thing, or you have to go over here and you have to do this or that. And if you don't do that, then you're just stuck in that room. Because what they do a lot of times with playtesting is that they actually have people doing the levels and seeing if they can figure out how to get through the level. And if they can't, that's when they put in, okay, it's time to, fuck around with this or that.
If you don't get play testing with your campaign, right? You get one shot.
Yeah, exactly. It's all one shot, and what happens, pretty much. In our third season, we ended up having the on-rail shooter, and we didn't really like it, but we were coming from a place where everything was so open, and the world was open. So, for instance, we had a road, and we're just traveling on this road, and we were supposed to turn, left on the road. Well, why? Like, I want to go straight. Well, no, you need to go left. But why? Like, I need something. Something needs to be over there to catch my attention, to be like, oh, there's something shiny. Somebody just darted down that way screaming, anything. And even then the players could still be like, I'm not going that way. Fuck that lady. She's probably being chased by an owlbear or something. I'm not getting involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just different. Oh, so Big Jim has a question, I think. Okay, so what do you do when you've got a guy who keeps asking to play, and it's obsessive, and I know where this is going, by the way, and can call out stuff you don't remember, and has this great character who likes to just be the bad guy, but not really, because he's a good guy, just asking for a friend? Okay, that's Big Jim. He's one of our patrons. He's very, what is the nicest way I can put, clingy. He's very clingy. Like, he has a lot of children, but for some reason, he just needs to be on us all the time. He always calls me when I'm shucking beans. He's always sending us these weird voice clips of him singing really out of pitch. But Big Jim, your hypothetical question, completely hypothetical question, the way you deal with them is you trick them into giving you money, like as much money as possible, through all of the means that you could possibly get. So, for instance, if you had that, you should open up a Twitch stream, and then every Twitch stream, when he pops in and pays money, you play everyone else against him, so he can't help but keep donating more money, even though he doesn't have any, and you're taking away food from his children, because I don't care, because that's his craziness. So hopefully that answers your question, Big Jim.
Well, then you can also start a GoFundMe, and then you use that money to also support.
Good idea. You could do a GoFundMe where instead of like, I have cancer or something like that, it's I have a Big Jim, get me to this amount of money. So then
get rid of my Big Jim.
Or get rid of my Big Jim, or it could be you could go the opposite way with it, whereas if you pay me this amount of money, I'll pretend to be your friend, Big Jim. Like that type of thing. It's like I'll actually feign caring about you for $5,000. Or 3 of your children. I could probably sell the parts for $5,000. It's a buyer's market for kids these days. Not that I know.
A lot of stem cells.
What?
A lot of stem cells.
It's true. I don't think you can use. I don't think stem cells are viable after a certain age.
I don't know. You're the doctor.
Snap them in half and find out. You never know. I learned that on South Park. Can't be wrong. But so let me see the next question we have here. And to go back a little bit to the on-rail thing, and we had that issue not just with where to go in the map, but also what to say. So that we literally hit a wall where we couldn't go any further because the DM wanted us to ask a specific question that we didn't know we were supposed to ask. And it was a very specific question. And so we just sat there because we were asking everything else but this question because we didn't even know it was something of importance. And he wrote everything around us asking that question. So he literally had to tell us what the question was for us to ask it. So then that just bogs it down too. So it is I find on-rail shooters work for small campaigns. Like only maybe like a 1-day session, maybe 2-day session tops. But if you're going to do something that's like an ongoing, long-term campaign, I think you need to have a lot more open, sandboxy stuff going on to give the players the feeling that the world is lived in and that they have the freedom. Like, you can have the quest like, oh, there's a giant monster that's rampaging through the countryside and only you, for whatever reason, can stop it. But, you're welcome to figure out how to do that however you want. And then give them little Easter eggs and carrots to move them however you want them to. But if they choose not to go that way, that's up to them.
Yeah. If you have players that want to steal a ship and become pirates, let
Yeah.
them.
There was a thread somebody sent me about crazy things that have happened in a D&D campaign, and the adventurers came back from a dungeon with a bunch of booty, and the next part of the quest was supposed to kick off, and they said, nah, we're going to buy this tavern and settle down. So then he had to change the entire campaign to where it was like a Cheers/business thing where they were just dealing with the routine day in, day out of running a business tavern. And he said it ended up being actually really funny and like a lot of fun because he didn't expect it to go that way. And it just ended up being crazy because then they would deal with other adventurers that were coming in. So they were basically dealing with it from the opposite point of view as opposed to going to the tavern and getting your quest. You're the guy at the tavern just handing out quests or whatever. So Zukari says, it's pretty hard running a sandbox campaign while still progressing the story. You're not wrong. Like I said, you basically have to have really shiny and yummy looking carrots for your dum-dum. I mean, not my group of friends that play with me. Normal people that want to, snag those and run with it. But I definitely feel your pain there. So let me see the next
figure out what motivates them. If they want a bunch of gold, then put a bunch of gold with the main boss. Or if they want to get powered armor or super powerful weapons, then put that with where you want them to go.
Yeah,
so you have to kind of lure them with what they want.
Like you were saying before, you have to know the party, which is why playing with a bunch of randos is very tough because you don't know what their end goal is. Like with the guys I play with, they want stuff. Like they murdered a hobo in a cave because he had a shiny rock. They didn't even know what the rock did, but it was shiny, so they murdered him for it. Now, granted,
it must be important.
It must be important. Yeah, he was locked in the cave because he was like a mutant, and so they went in there and they said his only possession was this shiny skipping stone. So, I'm gonna kill him for that. He's an abomination. I'm like, okay, this is normal, but I kind of figured they were gonna do it. But my next question for you is, so what is your ideal party size to manage?
I would say no more than 6.
Yeah. And 6 is pushing it too.
But no less than, I think, 3.
It depends on what you're playing. If you're playing some little subtle campaign that's not like a big save the world type thing, you could have 2 players. You could even have 1 player, really, if you really want to do a one-on-one. It's not as much fun, I would think, to do one-on-one because you're just interacting with one person. But even if you had 2 people, you could do some sort of little espionage or it can't be the same like hack and slash puzzle dungeon delving sort of thing. It just doesn't work because you just don't have the classes for it. But I agree. I probably wouldn't go more than 6. I have played with more than 6. I've played with like 10 before. Oh God, is it painful? Wow. Especially when you get to combat, because everybody has to take their turn, and like everybody always has like a billion things that they want to do on their turn. AKA Phil with his 30 actions that he just made up and pulled out of his ass. But
you get like a ranger or a monk, and they're going like for half an hour.
Yeah, I use a key point. Oh my God. I want to put in a rule that says you can only use 1 key point per turn, you bastards. Yeah, Zukari, 10 people. I had that one time. I do not recommend it. 4 to 5, that's a good. Yeah, that's usually my sweet spot. 4 to 5 people is good because usually you get a variation of party and play styles. It's enough people to make things different. Too few, it's too narrow. Too many, it's too wide. This person over here doesn't like evil players. Well, there's 2 people in the party that are evil, and this guy doesn't want to, blah, 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 and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Even if you didn't have combat and it was just role playing, there's so many people talking and wanting to do things that it's inevitable that some of the people are just not going to talk, and they're just going to recede to the background because of their personality.
And the party's going to split into something that's 3 or 4 people per group anyway. Yeah. Then you just manage 2 different groups.
Yeah, exactly. All right, you 6. Get in the other room. You 4 stay in this room, and then you're just playing 2 D&D sessions simultaneously. At that point, pretty much. So with parties, how do you handle when groups don't put healers in their party? Like, how do you deal with class compositions? Because sometimes you play with people. Everybody wants to be a barbarian. Well, that's kind of tough if no one can heal. But how do you deal with that?
Kind of on the fly. If they're doing really well, you don't find any healing potions on the bad guys. But if they're really struggling, then you have to throw them a bone. Either an NPC that's a healer, or they find healers on healing potions on dead bodies, or you got to find some way to keep them alive.
True. Zukari says kill them. Yeah, well, that is, I have seen that.
That's probably the easiest answer.
Yeah. Well, what I do if no one wants to play a healer, I do one of two things. I either put in like healing items, or I cheat and say you can use medicine checks to heal like a little, like to patch up wounds and do that sort of thing. Because in RPG games where you have to have a party, like WoW, we need a healer, we need a tank, and we need DPS and all that jazz. D&D's the same way. I don't like pigeonholing players into stuff that they don't want to play just to fill out the party. Now, recently you DM'd for one of our Patreons, and you did that, but that was to fuck with one of them. Because you're like, oh, you guys need a healer.
Yep.
And then the moment he picked healer, you're like, and silence. Or stupefy, whatever it was.
Yep.
And you can't cast spells anymore.
Yep.
Ha 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 ha.
People moan.
Yeah, so
that's
usually
that was kind of fun.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. I thought that. I got a good chuckle out of that. Especially since Austin, he was just saying nonsense words because his intelligence was a 1. Nothing made any sense. Yep. Oh, it's a dragon. Just run up, smack it right in the face. Zukari says, I run a moon druid so I can tank or heal. Well, in D&D, Zukari, there's not a whole lot of classes that can tank, DPS, and heal all at the same time. I guess paladins can do that to an extent. Yeah, clerics, maybe. But, like, if you're playing a sorcerer, you can't be, hack and slash. You're like, oh, I'm going to get this executioner's axe. I'm going to go to town. Okay, you're dead in, like, one hit, probably.
It's like a D4 hit die. I mean, it's like, great.
Exactly.
You're powerful, but...
Yeah, you cast lots of spells, but that's it. So how do you feel about people who play spellcasters? Aside from torturing them.
I'm impressed, to be honest. If you can play a spellcaster really well, you have mastered the mechanics of the game.
Yeah. Because it's micromanaging on a level that's just insane.
And it's knowing situationally how your spells are gonna either maximize damage or maximize benefit. But if you've got a player who's inexperienced, they're spending 3/4 of their time flipping through the pages of the player's handbook, and it's distracting.
Sure. So we got a question in the chat, one that's not from Big Jim, so it's like an actual legitimate question, from Simonak. He says, any advice for making homebrew classes, the best way to get started? Mike, have you ever made homebrew classes for what you're doing?
A long time ago, back in 3E.
Okay.
I've not done one for 5E.
I couldn't even imagine trying to do one in 4.
There were so many classes in 4. It was like they all kind of became the same in the end.
Yeah. But so how did you do it when you were in 3E?
I started pivoting off of an existing class.
Okay.
So it was like, hey, this is a fighter. How do I make them a little more sneaky? Or warlock, how to make their spells a little more powerful? So it was taking a starting point kind of in a direction that was maybe a little different. Or like a melee fighter druid, right? Almost like a multi-class.
Okay.
That kind of gets things a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, and Zukari literally was saying what you said while you were talking. He said homebrew is best derived from a pre-existing class and then tweaking it as you please. Now, that's if you're playing standard D&D. I've had, I think, 2 or 3 campaigns, maybe even 4, where it wasn't standard D&D, so all the classes were from scratch. The current campaign that we're starting for season 4, it's all from scratch because it's 1932 New York City. So obviously your warrior cleric stuff's not going to really fit unless you're trying to do like that really shitty He-Man movie where all the classes are now in New York and you're just trying to do it that way. But typically, the archetypes are still there. Like, if you think about the different archetypes that are in D&D, like you have the warrior character, and then you have different iterations of the warrior character. You have the different types of spellcasters. You have the healer. You have, the good guy, the bad guy, all that stuff. And then you just sort of build from there. So I know, for instance, in the campaign that I'm doing right now, we have, I forget how many classes there are because there's no races. So it's like a doctor or surgeon, so there's your healer. There's the professor or the archaeologist. There's the monster hunter. There's the detective or police officer or private investigator. There's the ex-cultist. There's fortune teller, and there's the magician. So those still have all the similar trappings of the classic archetypes, but they're just done differently. And the other thing, Cyrenac, when you're making classes, you have to think, okay, so when I'm giving them abilities, what's too powerful? Because you don't want to have, and you can't give them like a million abilities. You have to you have to look at the existing material and see, okay, this is the pattern I'm seeing for this is what they give them here, and then you have to sort of make up what would be similar in power. So if somebody had a power where it's like, okay, I'm going to give somebody else a +2 bonus for 1 round, you wouldn't then make a new class that says, all right, I'm going to give somebody an ability that's +8 at the same level. Like it doesn't really, you have to have it similar or close to being the same level, because otherwise it's just not going to be fair to the other people that are playing, unless of course all of your classes are made up from scratch. Cyrenac, hopefully that helps. Feel free to post if we just meandered around and didn't actually say what you wanted or whatever. Zukari said, I go bare form to afro, then back up to the heels if needed. Maybe that means aggro. I can't read on this TV screen. Best
no, it's probably afro.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I feel bad, but who is the guest? You said it was a DM for a Patreon episode, but I was too late to catch the beginning. Zukari, this is my friend Mike. He was in the, he's the DM for the March Patreon episodes, and then, what was the other Patreon you DM'd? It was
a while ago.
Yeah, it was last year. There was, I was the Witcher character. I was the bad guy the whole time. I forget what that was about. It was like drunken adventurers. There was like a party. I forget. Big Jim says, is also good to look at. I can't read what that word is. It looks like GURPS or another point buying system. So that's a question I have for you, Mike. Do you have a preference between rolling the die and doing a point buy system?
I like rolling the die.
Okay.
I like the chance piece of it.
Okay.
All the D&D Adventure Zone, not Adventure Zone, Adventure League stuff.
Okay.
Pre-made stuff is those rules are pretty much point buy. They don't leave a lot up to chance to try and normalize things a little bit more within the mechanics.
Okay.
But
we've played point buy one time, and I hated it. I hated it a lot because basically you have 2 stats that are going to be good, and then everything else is trash. And it's like it makes it really unfun to play unless you're just doing one thing where you're only going to need that 1 or 2 stats over and over and over again. And I get it's more themed, I suppose, because you don't need the warrior also being intelligent and charismatic and all this other stuff and being able to do everything. That's how the dice go sometimes. Sometimes you're going to roll a whole bunch of 18s and like nothing below a 14. It just happens sometimes. And then other times...
Like the character I made for you guys and you yelled at me.
It was the worst. That character you gave us was the worst in season 2.
All dice rolls, baby.
Yeah. Like it was... And None of the attacks
Highest
were
stat
good.
was a 14.
Yeah, the highest stat you gave us was a 14. So the for anyone who's aware, in the second season we had the character that everyone started looking for at the beginning and then forgot about after a while because they just started running around murdering profusely. He came back at the very end, and Mike was like, "Oh, I'm gonna make this character for you. Here's your playable NPC," and it was terrible. It did nothing. Like, couldn't hit anything. When it did hit something, it dealt no damage. The spells that he gave us were not useful for where he popped in, because it was like all big damagey spells, but they're in an enclosed cave, so it just would.
They're all AoE.
They're all AoE. I mean, he ended up being useful at the end, but that was more story based and not ability based, because the robot arm fell off and he like fused it back together or something. I forget. You'd have to go back and listen to season 2. But yeah, that. Big Jim says you can do both. Roll for your points. I've played one shots like that before. Usually, it's better to point buy for abilities, not attributes. And then he said, "Wait, Kamesh wasn't the worst? Huzzah!" I didn't care about Kamesh. He wasn't my cross to bear. That was the rest of the group that hated him. If it wasn't evident by the fact that Austin stabbed him in the face while he was unconscious, while Phil carried him. Zukari says the sandcastle ? I'm not 100% sure what you mean by the sandcastle. Oh, yes. I know what you're talking about. Yes. I forget what his first name was, but Franklin. It was Franklin Sandcastle. Yeah, you're right. Good job, Zukari. You remember way more than I do. By the way, I fixed the issue with Twitch, so now if you actually donate any bits or follow or do anything, it should actually pop up on the screen. So if you aren't already following the channel, please hit that follow button. If you are an Amazon Prime subscriber, hit that subscribe button, and you can actually subscribe through Twitch Prime, because Amazon owns Twitch, and you can subscribe for free, and then Amazon has to pay us money. So, yeah. But I don't see any other questions in chat, so let me find the next of Mike Holtz's questions. What is your favorite trap idea you've ever come across?
For me to answer?
Yeah.
There's probably one that I played with you guys, and it was the first one we did last year. And it was in a dungeon, and it was this body of water on the floor. And you guys were super afraid to step in it and try to get around it. And you fell in it, and it was only like 6 inches deep.
Yeah. Okay.
But it took like an hour to get past it. You guys were trying super hard, and I loved it.
So I love traps like that too, where you're basically playing against the idea of what they expect a trap to be. And this wasn't in one of our seasons. This was... I think this was the first the first big campaign I did with the actual group we're playing with, where it was a campaign based around the idea of lycanthropy. And they were in this puzzle dungeon, and they go in the room, and it's 2 doors. And the moment you go in, the other door closes, and then this pedestal comes up from the ground, and it's just got one big red button on it. And then a screen comes down with a timer, and it starts at 30 and just starts ticking down. And there's nothing else in the room, and the pedestal is indestructible. And so they run up to it, and they're like, "Oh my God, what do we do? What do we do?" So they hit the button. The timer resets back to 30 and starts counting down. So they spent an hour trying to figure out what they were supposed to do. And my niece the whole time was yelling the right answer. But basically they told her to shut the hell up. She didn't know what she was talking about. And so anytime, and they finally decided, you know what, we're just not going to press the button. See what happens if we don't press the button. It would get to 1 second, and then Phil would like panic and be like, "I hit the button," and it would go back to 30 seconds, and it would count back, and they keep getting close, and then they would panic and hit the button again, trying to figure something else out, and then eventually, they just didn't hit the button, and then the door opens when the timer goes off, and my niece was flipping out because that is exactly what she had said 45 minutes ago. And I just love traps like that just subvert expectations. And you're used to a puzzle dungeon. You're pretty sure this is what's going to happen. And then it doesn't happen.
Yep.
In season 3, we had a whole giant puzzle dungeon that way. And it agitated the shit out of them. There was a room where I was like, okay, it's got 4 benches in it. There's one on one side. There's 2 on this side. There's one over here. There's 3 sconces over here. None of that mattered. Absolutely none of it mattered. They just had to turn the knob. It was still a trap door, but they thought they had to do something, which reminds me of when I was in college, I had read this study. Now, I was a psych major, and I could not care less about the practice of psychology, but the studies I really liked, and one of them was on superstitions, superstitious pigeons. So they studied superstitious behavior with pigeons. So what they did was they gave them a cage, and it had a button in it, and it was a food release. So they'd go over and they'd figure out you hit the button, the food pops out. Well, then they turned it off. So then they'd hit the button and nothing would happen. And they would just do random intervals of hitting, like just giving food. And the pigeons started doing all kinds of crazy shit, like spinning in circles, like a specific number of times.
Does it happen like one time?
Yeah, because it happened one time, so it would start doing it all the time. Like pigeon spinning. They had ones where it would like go upside down in the cage for a while. They said they would start dancing. They would squawk, and everything was very specific, the number of times it would do it. And then it would stop and wait to see what would happen. And then it would go through the whole rigmarole again. And if it didn't change, then when the pill got redistributed, then it changes its superstition again. So I always like that idea of, you get these ideas stuck in your head. This is how it's going to be. This is how I have to do it. And then you just say, nah, fuck you. And then just screw them over that way. Being a DM is a lot about torturing others and getting joy out of it, I find. Sure, it's fun to watch people work together.
You answer one of my other questions.
Say that again?
You answer one of my other questions. As a DM, do you actively try to kill your players?
Actively? I wouldn't say I actively try and kill the players. I'm hoping that they die. But I don't... Okay. I don't make things impossible so that just for the explicit purpose of them dying. Now, Phil will disagree with this because in the 3rd season, they did this thing where they murdered children and caused an entire town to die and didn't follow any of the orders that they were given and fucked everything up. And then they sat and they waited for a reward. And then when the guy showed up, he wasn't there to give them a reward. He was there to kill them for disobeying orders, which they didn't like. And then when they tried to fight him, I said, oh, no. He's like a level 15, and you're level 7s. And they got mad because I put a character in that they couldn't beat. And I'm like, well, you're not supposed to fight that character. You're not supposed to be able to beat everything at any level. Like, that's not how... Like, play an open world game. Like, you can't just skip to the end boss in the first level and be like, okay, well, I should be able to fight that. It's in the game. Like, I'm the hero. Like, this is how it should work. No, it's not how that works at all. Hey, Who is Steve asks, how do you set up expectations for traps with a group that's not used to encountering traps at all? So, Hey, Who is Steve, or He Who is Steve, sorry. For me, anyways, if they have no experience with traps, then you could do anything you want because they are not familiar with traps. So you can use any trap you want, and they won't know. It'll be new for them. And the fun with that is, after a while, if you keep playing with that group of players, then they're going to start to develop that sense of like, well, this happened in one of these other traps, so I'm going to do this time. And then you flip it on its head. Mike, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it only takes one time running down a hallway without checking for traps and a bunch of poison darts, riddling your body for people to start checking.
You'd think that.
Yeah, that's true.
You'd think that. But if they don't have a corpse to throw down that hallway, they're just going to say, yep, I'm going.
Yeah.
Or if they look and they don't see anything, they're just like, well, I only rolled a perception check at 9. Looks good to me. Sprint. Yeah, no. It depends on the level of stupidity of the people you're playing with. Or drunkenness, or both. Either way. But does that answer your question, Steve? Or did you want anything like more specific in terms of like what are good beginner traps or something like that? Sicario said Nacho. Yes, Nacho del Grande. That was that character that was not supposed to be fought. Nacho del Grande. Did you have any other questions off the top of your head, Mike? We're coming close to the end here. So maybe like another one or two questions, and then we'll probably wrap it up.
Yeah. I mean, what are your tips for combat? How do you make combat engaging and fun for everybody?
So, as I had mentioned before, trying to make a combat interesting by utilizing the setting, but that's difficult because you don't know what the players are going to do. So, for instance, in season 1, I put that giant robot boss in the middle of a city thinking there's lots of different buildings, there's lots of different levels, there's lots of different things going on. So there's all kinds of different ways you could approach this problem. Mm-hmm. Same thing in season 2. They're fighting the Dogland Terminator. It's in a factory. There's all kinds of different ways you can approach it. And sometimes it doesn't always work out. Like Phil was up in the rafters, or he was in an air duct, but he was being not sneaky at all, just clanking around in there, so it shot missiles at him. But that could have worked if he had not failed in what he was doing. Making combat interesting and fun also helps if you encourage the players to be creative, even if it's a normal attack. So this was a rule that was in 2E, but I don't think it's in any of the other editions. A called shot? Do you know if they're in any of the other ones, Mike?
I think 3E had that.
3E has it? Okay.
-2, I think, to a called shot.
Yeah. So, like, if you want to be specific, like, so you're not just, I'm going to run up and I'm just going to hit it with my sword. Okay. I'm going to run up and I'm going to try and chop off a leg. Okay. Called shot. And then you roll. And then as a DM, you have to, decide, did they do enough, if they hit, did they do enough damage to cut the leg off, or, what changes? And then that alters the strategy. If somebody runs up and they're like, I'm just going to try and chop their head off. Okay. That's another thing. Or I'm going to shoot him right in the eyes. All right, well, now the creature's blind. So that changes everything again. So the best way to spice up combat, I think, is to encourage creative thinking. They won't always do it. A lot of times they won't do it. But having a setting that's not just a plain old cave, different levels, different things going on, and then having creatures that, even if it's not in the book, but having it so that there's more than one way to beat it. Okay, you can run up and you can hit it in the face over and over and over again until it's dead if you really want to. Or you can try and, blind it, or you can, and then trick it into falling off of something, or, whatever. Hey, thanks, Okari, for subscribing through Twitch Prime. Much appreciated. He who is
like in the last campaign, or the last adventure that I did, you guys just banished the dragons.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Mike put in these giant dragons for us to fight, and Austin goes, I banished them. They're in another dimension now. Oh.
Yeah, and they failed. Then they just blinked, and they're gone. And
then the next thing he did was like, I'm putting an anti-magic zone. So no spells can get through. And then you basically had to cheat because you're like, well, this spell needs to happen for the story to progress. So, blah. So, he who is Steve left, he said he's super high on cough syrup. It's time to strap on a bunch of weapons to his waist and drive a car. So, because he's a police officer.
Good luck.
So that's who he is.
Okay.
Yeah. He's not just randomly driving around with weapons. It's not Mad Max.
I'm not judging.
Yeah. Zukari asked, well, I want to get your answer to that question. How do you spice up combat?
Very similar.
Okay.
Very similar. Try to use the environment. A variety of bad guys helps too. Yeah. I think spellcasters are underused as bad guys.
Well, in my experience, when I've tried to use spellcasters, they just die really, because if they don't hit the spell, like if you just roll low and the spell doesn't hit, they die in like one hit or two hits or something ridiculous. And then it's like, well, you just hit that paper cannon and blew it up. So,
well, then you throw in a couple rogues who are sneaking, and they start.
There you go. So again, it's all trying to be more creative and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, use kind of an anti-party against the party. Use a spellcaster, use a barbarian, use a rogue. Mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. I find whenever you put barbarians in the opponent's party, Usually ends horribly for your party, or yeah, because
You roll better than your players.
yeah, and barbarians are really really strong. They only take half damage. So if you're playing with a class or a party that doesn't have spellcasters, oh, all your damage is halved. Have fun with this, guys. And then just rage, 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 rage.
Yeah.
Zukari asked, "What's the greatest improv moment we've both had? By great, I mean most entertaining." Mike, I'll start with you. What's the greatest?
I want to think about that one. Yeah, you go first.
Okay, the greatest improv moment I've ever had as a DM. Well, as a player, I'll speak to what Mike was just talking about with his campaign. When he came on for our Patreon episode, he put a purple worm in the game. We were not supposed to fight a purple worm. That thing, we had no business fighting a purple worm, and it was in an abandoned town. I found a bar that had a bunch of alcohol in it, and I was playing a Witcher character, so I know I can, snap my fingers and light a candle. So I broke a bunch of booze in there and basically made it into, this explosive thing. And I tricked it by calling it worm tits or something, and had it chase me into the building. Now, I had to roll a bunch of things to make it work, but it did work, so that as he was going in the building, I ran in and then jumped out the window and set off the candle and blew up the building. And it didn't kill the worm, but it made it go away. Now, of course, the building collapsed on top of me and the party left me there to die, but
They did.
whatever. As a DM, the greatest improv moment I've ever had probably was season 2 with the Moose People. Because I didn't have any of that written to start with. I eventually wrote it, but they said, we're going to the Moose Town. Go to the Moose Town. I have to come up with, what's going on in the town right now. Oh, it's a peace summit between these rabbits. The Moose People are Canadians, so they're really nice to everybody. So that's why everyone's going there for a peace summit. What awful thing is about to befall these people? Well, it was actually right around that time there was a terrorist attack, I think, and I forget where it was. So
Stadium or something, wasn't it?
Well, we put it in a stadium, but I don't remember what happened in real life that was the terrorist attack.
Oh, wow.
I think it was the London bombing or something like that. But so I set that whole premise up, and then that was the how the episode ended. So then it gave me time to write off of that. But I essentially made up the whole moose thing on the spot in terms of, what's the main conflict going to be? Who are the people that are there? What are the interactions? That sort of thing. Came up with all that right there in the moment, and then built off of it. The mayor was great. Well, thank you. Narwhal. Got to be the narwhal. You mean the one that was covered in knives and stuff? That one? Because Big Jim wrote in this, I think it was Big Jim. He wrote in this narwhal that was super powerful and covered in, it was heavy metal narwhal, just covered to the nines. And then, or no, who was that? Somebody, it was one of the Patreons had made that as a, no, it was Phil. Phil put that narwhal in there, and then Big Jim played a druid character and just, we're friends now. And then it just pulled the boat the rest of the way. And he was like, God damn it, I put that in there. Ugh. Yeah.
Yes, it was great.
Yeah, Tsukari, the metal narwhal. That's right. Phil wrote it. Yeah. What time? You have time for one more question, Mike?
Yeah, I can do one more.
So, chat, I'm going to open this up to you. If you can come up with a question that you want us to answer, we'll do that. That'll be the last question for the night. If not, we'll do one more from the pre-prepared questions. But yeah, I'll give you guys a couple seconds here to try and come up with something. Hopefully it's not Big Jim. Big Jim, you're not allowed to ask a question unless you have donated at least 500 bits. Just saying. Today. I'm not counting Saturday.
Isn't he a producer?
He's an executive producer. That doesn't stop me from milking him for everything I can. Favorite monster to pull out last minute. Mike didn't say his best improv. Oh, that's right. You didn't say your best improv moment. You made me give you time.
That's
so
right.
It's yours.
I think for nostalgia's sake, it was a long time ago. It was one of the first times I was DMing. One of the players we were playing with had a whetstone, but he wrote it WET.
Okay.
And it was a stone that was always wet.
I think
and
I remember that.
it came back and it saved the day a few times for a variety of reasons. And
I can't
it
remember.
would
But
just
yeah, that's pretty great.
it was a typo that became kind of a piece of lore throughout the rest of the campaign.
Yeah, that's pretty great. Well, we had something similar with an item where it was this was before we started recording. This was the first campaign I played with these guys. It was the lycanthropy campaign. I gave them this shield of buttons, and I love giving items with random effects.
Yeah.
And or a chance of an effect. Tristan had this shield that a 25% chance it reflects back whatever damage you would be doing. So there was a part where they blew up a house and it was collapsing on top of him. So he put his shield up and it went off, and instead it shot the house into the rest of the city. So just debris were raining down into like other houses and things like that. But my favorite part with that was, and if the higher the percent was, the more powerful the sending it back. So he was being surrendered. Now, it was a part of a story where it was a little bit on railsy, where I wanted them to get arrested, so that way it would move the story along. So they went to the docks, and it was a big a bay that had like an entryway, so they could close it because the whole city was walled. Mm-hmm. And so the bay got closed off, and cops were coming from every direction, and Tristan didn't want to get caught. So he used the shield like a pogo stick. He put it under his feet, and he jumped. So he's just like, ha! And jumps off the ground. Well, I rolled 100%. So because he jumped and did it that way, I said it sent him flying into the atmosphere. And so every so often, if they looked up, they could see his body and shield just flying like in a orbit around the planet every once in a while. And then eventually it crashed back down to the planet, and they got it. And there was just like a charred corpse next to it, and they knew who it was. But that was also one of my favorite little like improv last second moments.
Yeah, little gems.
Yeah. Chat, I haven't seen a question yet, so I'm going to go ahead and pick one of the ones that Mike had sent. There's a few ones that I kind of want to touch on. You know what? I kind of want to do this one. Or maybe not. We already talked about that. Never mind. What do you do when a player is derailing the story or the mojo of the party?
I was trying to get I wanted to ask you that one, because this happened when I tried to play last weekend. Mm-hmm. And I was a player. I wasn't a DM at this point. So I was trying to bite my tongue, mm-hmm. But it took some meta gaming to kind of reel that person in, mm-hmm. And some. I mean, so this is the person who wanted to just kind of burn down the cart, right? Mm-hmm. And I just stopped the whole campaign. So it was like, yeah, the town's coming after you now. So I think throwing in some consequences is a good way to do it. Yeah. That are outside of the party. But sometimes you just have to let the players scratch that itch. I think sometimes they just get like a wild hair, and I gotta kill something, and you just let them, and then some consequences for it. But I think if you resist too much, they'll make your life hell for the rest of the adventure.
Yeah. Well, our group has sort of a weird checks and balances system, because they are murder hobos and they see no reason why they should ever have to deal with consequences ever. Mm-hmm. But if one of their group members starts doing something that annoys them, like their characters and vicariously them, mm-hmm. in such a way that they're not being allowed to do what they want to do because this person, just for whatever reason, is being totally obnoxious, they just kill them off real fast. Like one way, like either they just stab them in the back and kill them right there on the spot, or they find a way to make it look like an accident, so they're dead, and then the person has to make a new character with a different point of view. That's if they're playing that way.
Mm.
If they just continuously want to derail everything just because that's their personality, yeah, I feel like somebody like that's not going to stay in that group for very long, because oddly enough, everyone got real busy, so there's no time. No, we're playing. We're not inviting that person anymore. They're not allowed back. So
yeah, the kind of players that just want to watch the world burn.
it
They
works
probably
sometimes.
have, yeah, but they probably have other issues that they need to work on.
Yeah.
That it's not conducive to try and do that through the lens of D&D.
Yeah, because unless you're playing with a group of people that just want to watch the world burn, because if that's everybody's goal is to just chaos, sure, great. That could be fun in and of itself. Not fun for the DM necessarily, because then they have to like come up with a whole new thing or whatever they're doing. Because I'm expecting heroes. Oh no. There's no heroes in this game. But yeah, a lot of times you won't usually have to get to that point if you're playing with people you already know, because if you've been playing with them long enough that you keep playing with them, chances are they're not going to be doing something like that unless it's just the player quirk that they came up with for that particular character, in which case they're going to get that character killed off real fast anyways, and then it won't matter. And then they'll switch to something else, and, so on and so forth. Zukari, we're going to end on this question because I did ask the chat for one question. Zukari asked, if you've got time, what was the one thing you guys were really excited for that the group absolutely hated? Could be a monster, a character, a dungeon, whatever. Not Kamesh. That's more for me than you.
I think the last adventure I did with you guys, the dungeon I threw you in at the end, maybe it's because it was like midnight when we were trying to play. But you guys were not feeling the dungeon at all.
No. Well, so with that, and I had chalked this up to Phil. I said, we started so late. We made Mike sit there for like 3 hours and just wait for us to get done singing our freaking song that we did. And so I was like, he's probably really freaking tired because he had to work all day and then drive here like in an hour and a half and then sit here for 3 hours. And he still has to drive home, which he's probably thinking about the whole time. And then we as players had been up all day and doing that theme song and all that stuff. So usually when it gets that late, everyone gets cranky anyways. Then couple that with a dungeon where in order to get to where you need to go, you have to roll a specific, or at least maybe I'm wrong, but it seemed like we had to roll a specific number when opening a door or it couldn't progress any further. So whether or not that was true, that's how we perceived it.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like you guys, it was so late. You guys were fixated on trying to get that last number, and I wasn't gonna tell you no, which I probably should have because it was so late. But you guys like, it's got to be a 12. Keep going until we get a 12, and it's like that's not true, but okay.
I mean, we had that with the most recent Patreon, where I put them in a Taco Bell bathroom. I lock the door. There's bleach. How much more of a shiny carrot do I need to give you guys? It's the beginning of the 2-episode campaign, and you're locked in a bathroom with bleach in a Taco Bell. I feel like it's pretty obvious what I want you to do, but they just weren't getting it. So then I was just like, you know what? I want you to roll a sanity check for me. And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, Constitution and Wisdom. Roll. And they're like, a 15. I was like, you don't want to kill yourself by drinking bleach yet. And then they sit and they blink for a couple seconds. They're like, I roll sanity again. And I'm like, what'd you get? 10. All of a sudden, you're overcome with the realization that everything sucks and I want to drink bleach. Oh, okay. See, now I'm good. Yes, yeah. Stupid people.
Yeah, and see, both of those things are, I think, symptoms of it being too railsy.
Yes, yeah. But again, if it's only 2 episodes,
it's hard to.
It's kind of hard to have it be open-ended and only be real short. But the thing that I was really excited for that the group absolutely hated was probably season 3. The
whole thing?
No, definitely not the whole thing. The third part, I think. Yeah, part 3, where they had to get the airship and go to the religious area because everyone kept complaining, not in the game, but everybody outside, all the listeners, kept complaining about there were no consequences. They were just murder hobos. They did whatever they wanted, and nobody ever got in any trouble. So I said, aha, this time will be different. And so I thought up all the different ways that this could go. I didn't write any of it down, but I just knew where I wanted to go if they made certain decisions. And they made every worst decision. So I was like, yep, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And it was all laid out in my head. And they kept making bad decision after bad decision until it got to the point where all the characters got murdered. And I was real happy when it got to that point because I was just like, this is going to be really funny because they're going to finally fight something they can't beat, and then it's going to be the first ever party wipe. No, that's not how that went. We ended up having to have like a meeting about that episode because everyone was so unhappy, and we had to like do rewrites and things like that. And so, yeah, that was probably a thing that I was super excited for because there were so many different possibilities, even though I knew what was going to happen because I know what shitty humans they all are, and they still made all the decisions I thought they'd make. And while it was fun for me, it was not fun for any of them. So that's probably my experience. But yeah, the soul bomb. Exactly, Zukari. Yes, good thing. Thank you, Zukari, for both of the questions that you had. So I want to thank everybody who came out to watch this. Anybody who's watching this post recording. If you haven't already, hit that follow button. We really appreciate it. If you are an Amazon Prime subscriber, you can subscribe to us using Twitch Prime, and that gives us a little bit of money for free that you don't have to give us. It helps the show grow. Head on over to patreon.com/botchedpodcast, where you get over 300 hours worth of content at this point in the form of bonus episodes, me talking about my crazy dating stories. Everyone seems to like those for some reason. Digital art prints, being able to play with us in our own little bi-weekly campaign, getting playable campaigns that I give to you guys that you can play with your friends. That's where there's all kinds of different levels. So head on over to patreon.com/botchedpodcast and subscribe. Tomorrow night, I'll be back with Phil and I believe Kurt. We'll be playing some more dating simulators. I think we're playing Kitty Powers Matchmaker, so that should be fun. And Mike, I want to say thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you had a good time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hopefully we'll have you again sometime. But yeah, thanks everybody. And yeah, see you guys next time.
All right, bye. Thanks, guys.
See if I can figure out how to stop the stream. All right.